So I'm going to start with the ransomware attack. This is the latest one. It's so coincidental this all keeps happening with Joe Biden as president. I'm sure you saw his response. What do you think about the way that America is dealing with these Russian hacking situations?
Well, regardless of who's behind it, we don't know if it's the Russians or if it's somebody else or whatever. But, look, here's the thing. Generally speaking, weakness invites attack from our adversaries and our enemies and people that would seek to take advantage of us. So the fact that Biden so badly mishandled that first hack, right, the Colonial Pipeline attack that led to the gas shortages and whatnot,
right,
all up and down the East Coast, that invites other bad actors around the world to engage in similar type behavior. So Biden's weakness, generally speaking, which we saw on display in the Putin meeting, which we saw on display with Secretary Blinken's meeting with the Chinese communists up in Anchorage, Alaska, which we've seen repeatedly from the Biden administration for the first 6 months of this administration. It's been nonstop weakness. And so what happens? The bad actors around the world sense that, hey, guess what? We can go in and do this, and we're going to get away with it. Because guess what? The Joe Biden administration isn't going to really do anything to hold us accountable. They're going to issue a strongly worded letter and maybe give a press conference in response to us. But guess what? We're getting paid, right? And that's all they care about. If they can get paid and get away with it, they're going to keep doing it. And Joe Biden, again, just a total failure in response to any of our adversaries' actions, including these hacking.
Yeah, and speaking of how he's, inviting more problems, his position on the border was very problematic from the beginning. Even when he was campaigning, he kind of advised people that it would be okay to surge the border. He was going to be the moral, decent man. And now a new poll came out of Washington Post and ABC News, and it says that 51% of respondents are not satisfied with the president's handling of the border crisis. Do you think his administration knows that this is a huge problem for them, especially going into the midterms?
Well, yeah, they know it's a huge problem. They know the border's a huge problem. They know that crime's a huge problem, and they know the economy's a huge problem. Joe Biden's underwater on every single major issue, with the exception of the pandemic. People are giving him, in some of the polling numbers, you're seeing his response to the pandemic, only because he just managed the Trump vaccine distribution program that President Trump left for him behind. But that's the only issue on which Joe Biden's in the black on. Everything else he's in the red on. And his approval rating overall is barely hanging in there at 50%. That's very low for a modern president. Trump was kind of an exception to the rule on this, so he was under 50 from the get-go. But generally speaking, presidents usually are up in the 60s or so for their first year in office, and Biden is just far below that. He's very underperforming. And this is why Biden keeps trying to change the conversation back to COVID, back to coronavirus. Even though we know the pandemic's behind us, they had a giant party at the White House the other night for July 4th with nobody wearing masks. 2,000 people there, no masks, a giant party. Everybody knows that the worst of this pandemic's behind us. But Joe Biden tries to keep changing the conversation. He's giving a speech today on coronavirus because it's the only issue on which he's polling well. And the only reason why he's polling well on it is because he followed the Trump plan for vaccine distribution.
Right. He had it all laid out for him. He just had to kind of not mess it up. But with everything else, he does seem to be stepping in it. And it makes me think, especially when we talk about a lot of this foreign policy, the issues that are arising. Obama's defense secretary, Robert Gates, once said that Biden was wrong on almost every single foreign policy issue over the last 4 decades. Do you think that's changed since he's come into office, Matt? I mean, we're seeing a lot.
No, you're just seeing it on display. So, look, you didn't see it entirely during the Obama administration because Biden was the vice president. So, yes, he had a huge hand in it. And every time you saw him, a particular theater that was assigned to him, it would end up ending in chaos. But the whole world didn't break. The Obama administration was pretty much a disaster the world over, but we're now seeing much worse because Joe Biden's actually got his hands on the wheel. He's the commander-in-chief, and so you're seeing that weakness the world over, everywhere from China to Russia to the Middle East to the Northern Triangle countries in Central America to Latin America writ large, to everywhere the world, to Iran. everything. Afghanistan is a mess now. I mean, how do you screw that up, right?
Well,
Like,
I was just going to ask you, Matt. I was just going to ask you, there's a headline today in the Daily Mail. It says 20,000 troops are ordered to the border to stop Afghanistan soldiers fleeing the Taliban. I wanted to ask you your thoughts on this because Afghan troops are filmed laying down arms as U.S. general overseeing NATO exit says he's shocked by how quickly they've surrendered to the Taliban. Do you have any take on this?
Yeah, well, look, again, I was there with Secretary Pompeo when he was overseeing the intra-Afghan peace talks in Qatar last year. We went there on September 11th. So I was there in the Middle East. I saw the Trump administration firsthand managing this, and they had negotiated out various deals with the Taliban, the Afghan government, so on and so forth. And Biden, for purely political purposes, is trying to make this whole withdrawal his own, and then in the process, he's like handing the whole country over to the Taliban. Like, so one of the big things that Secretary Pompeo and President Trump were negotiating when they were leading the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, which, by the way, they would have already been out. So under the Trump plan, we would have been ended in Afghanistan by May. So May at the latest. It was supposed to be April, right? So the Biden administration changing up the Trump plan, just like they did on the border, just like they've done everywhere else, has now invited chaos, and now you've got the Taliban taking over and running amok. So Joe Biden, again, total failure on every single policy where he tries to put his hands on it. So the question is that, again, will the American people recognize it? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe, hopefully, there's a shot at a course correction here upcoming in the midterm elections and then in the 2024 election. So we'll see if the American people can see the same things that we're talking about here. But every single thing they do, they screw it up.
Yeah, I'm speaking with Matt Boyle from
thing they've succeeded on.
I'm speaking with Matt Boyle from Breitbart. And Matt, I do want to ask you about the Keystone Pipeline, because this is one of those issues where it really goes along with what you're saying. He got in there. If he just didn't do anything, it would have been fine. You know, these are unforced errors. He goes in almost like Leroy Jenkins and says, I'm going to mess this up as much as I can. So he ends the Keystone Pipeline. And now the Keystone Pipeline owners are going to sue the Biden administration for $15 billion worth of damages for blocking their permit. Can you explain to people how insane it is that we're blocking this that would have carried 800,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada to the U.S. And in other countries, none of this stuff is being blocked. We're only shooting ourselves in the feet here.
Yeah, well, look, the idea that shutting down the pipeline is going to stop the production of said oil is just silly. It's not. So what's going to happen? They're either going to truck it down to Texas, which, by the way, is worse for the environment than a pipeline. So the pipeline is very environmentally safe. So they're either going to truck it down to Texas now, or to refine it, or the Chinese are going to step in and buy it for $1 cheaper or whatever. And the Chinese and other foreign adversaries of the United States are going to step in and take advantage of the Biden administration screw-ups here. Who pays the price for all of this in the end? The American consumer, because you want to know why you're paying $1 more in gas at the pump every average around the country. In some big cities, it's probably even more. I don't know what it is up in Boston, but I know it's more in some of the big cities around the country. But the reason why people are paying more in gas is because of these policies. We were energy independent under the Trump administration for the first time in a generation. And Biden, in his first couple days in office, with the stroke of a pen, destroyed that. And it was clearly just out of spite. All he had to do was not screw it up. But everything that he does, he screws it up. He bumbles it. It's a mistake. It's a disaster. And the people who pay the price for it are the average Americans out there.
Oh, very well said. Matt Boyle from Breitbart. Everyone go to Breitbart.com and read Matt's articles. He has great stuff, great takes on everything. And it is, you're absolutely right. He just manages to step in it every time. And the people who are punished are regular Americans. Law-abiding, tax-paying Americans are going to get screwed because Joe Biden wanted to show that he is a more moral, decent man than the evil orange man. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yep, thanks for having me anytime.
The frenzied real estate market is causing bidding wars across certain segments. Real estate brokers are holding calls for highest and best offers because demand is so high. I don't even need to tell you that. Demand is ridiculous right now. The market is hot. How do you as a seller know if you've realized all of the money for your property and if you sold under the best terms? When selling real estate, Let the bidding war experts for over 45 years sell your property quickly, contingency-free, and for true market value. There's something to be said for having an expert. You know, you don't look back and say, I could have done this differently. I could have done that differently. No, you know you're in the best hands. Recent real estate auctions for Howie Carr listeners have attracted as many as 30 qualified cash-ready buyers battling for their properties. At the end of your auction, you'll know that no money was left on the table, and that's a great feeling. Remember, when you sell your real estate in the usual way with a broker, you pay the commission, but in a JJ Manning auction, the buyer pays, and that saves you, the seller, thousands of dollars right there. Whether residential, commercial, or land, JJ Manning can get your property sold now. To learn more on how to get your property sold quickly and contingency-free, contact Charlie Gill at 800-521-0111 or jjmanning.com. Charlie Gill is at 800-521-0111 or go to jjmanning.com and get your property sold. On the other side, we have to go over some of Joe Biden's biggest tall tales, and we'll vote on that. And we also, I want to talk a little bit about how this was July 4th weekend, and while most of us were celebrating and, you know, singing the national anthem and you know, looking at our beautiful American flags, a lot of liberal outlets were spewing hate against the country we love so much. Don't let this destroy your faith in the integrity of the mainstream media. We'll be right back. This is The Grace Curley Show.
You're listening to The Grace Curley Show.